On a lonely planet slowly spinning its way to damnation, amid the incompetence and unpreparedness of lesser space programs, one team stands resilient against the herds, putting their lives on the line to aid those who were previously unaware of the quick-save option. Yes, it's the incredible adventures of Jebediah and his crack team of Kerbinauts. They are the Blunderbirds. Saving the Kerbin race one stranded explorer at a time.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of The Blunderbirds, which for those of you who are unaware is a series in which I rescue stranded Kerbals from who have been stranded by other players of the game. That was a good sentence, wasn't it? This week we rescue this fellow who, in a tragic turn of events, has left his hapless Kerbals stranded on LAYTHE. But not just stranded, they're left swimming in the ocean without a paddle. And given how far out LAYTHE is from the sun, it's probably not a very nice ocean either. Likely methane or something nasty. Lovely, wavy, deep blue, oxygenated methane. Sometimes you gotta suspend your disbelief when playing this game. Anyway, in case some of you never found counting to be your strongest asset, there were 6 Kerbals there. So a quick rundown of our objective whilst we launch our craft, which we'll get to in a minute. We have to rescue 6 Kerbals from LAYTHE, but not just anywhere on LAYTHE, from the middle of its oceans. Now, Kerbals can't swim as fast as they can run, and on LAYTHE their RCS packs don't provide enough thrust to let them fly over the surface, so we're gonna have to land pretty damn close to them if we don't want this mission to go on for 7 years. This is a pretty tall order with a conventional rocket, so I immediately knew that some sort of aircraft would be the best means of getting the Kerbals from the ocean, and because they're in the ocean and miles away from land, the aircraft would have to also be capable of aquatic takeoff and landing. Enter the LAYTHE Gull Mark II, aka Blunderbird 8. There's a beautiful little flyby shot using the mod camera tools, part of BD Armory, in case anyone can't find the download link. It's a fully amphibious seaplane capable of landing on and reorbiting LAYTHE in one stage. Now, those of you that have been subscribed since the way back ancient times of 2016, I sent an aircraft to LAYTHE carrying lots of science equipment and a deployable mini-sub, and that was like an amphibious plane as well. So why not just send that craft again? Well, first things first, it'd be pretty boring to just reuse a craft from an earlier video, but also because of the fact that that plane could only carry 4 Kerbals, which is not going to cut it for this mission. I mean, sure, we could have replaced the science units and mini-sub bay with crew modules, but then I'd refer you back to my first point of reusing the craft, even though I've done that before in the Blunderbirds, but never mind. Yeah. Right, so all of that out of the way, maybe, just maybe, it'd be a good idea to talk about the flight plan for this mission. So, as we enter a stable orbit, there we go. So we have a little bit of thrust left in this sort of lower ascent stage. We can use some of that to get on our way to LAYTHE, but obviously the bulk of the burn and the rest of the burns in this mission are going to be done with the nuclear stage. Right then, so like my last LAYTHE seaplane mission, this isn't actually a full SSTO mission, as I'm sure you might have figured out by this point. Rather, it consists of a super high capacity interplanetary tug, with the spaceplane only comprising the LAYTHE lander itself. I did think about making this a full-on SSTO mission, as in kind of one stage from the surface of Kerbin and back again, but I didn't for 2 reasons. First is that I would rather give a mission of such impressive scale its own video rather than tie it to the Blunderbirds, but also because I really didn't have time if I wanted to stick to my 1 KSP mission per week rule that I've kind of self-imposed upon myself. It seems like a weak excuse, I know, but I do genuinely pride myself on making sure I'm consistently providing content for you guys. So because of my tight time scale, a full-on SSTO, I'm doing the air quotes thing with my fingers. It wasn't possible, at least not at my skill level, because of the fact that several precise gravity assists would be required, and I might have been able to do it in time, but I couldn't guarantee it, whereas I could this way. And besides, I've already done LAYTHE SSTOs, and ones that are far more impressive than the one at this level as well. If you're interested in seeing that sort of mission, I'll whack a link on the end screen of this video, but if you really can't wait, then if you just type in, I don't know, Matt Lowne LAYTHE SSTO into the YouTube search bar, I'm sure it would show up. But in a way, like, I've kind of talked about this a little bit on Blunderbirds as well. These are kind of sort of almost to serve as like tutorials or kind of guides to help you if you put your Kerbals in a similar situation, like when eventually we'll have probably done at some point I imagine I'll have done a Blunderbirds to every single celestial body in the game, at which point if you strand Kerbals somewhere, you could just look up the relevant Blunderbird, see how I did it, and use that as not a tutorial, but as an inspiration and kind of as a guide to help you with your own mission. And you can see me here quickly doing a maneuver node. Look at that, talking about the footage on screen for once. I'm doing a gravity assist with Tylo to get into a dual orbit. As I mentioned, I like to keep things simpler in Blunderbirds, hence why there's no complex gravity assists, but a Tylo gravity assist to get into dual orbit is pretty standard game at this point, so I recommend learning how to do it. There are probably tutorials out there, but if you can't quite get it from just watching this footage. But other than this particular gravity assist, as I was saying, I like Blunderbirds to kind of serve as soft guides. So complex gravity slingshots and things to do massive SSTO missions might not have been the best thing. But then again, I've done SSTOs in Blunderbirds before, so maybe all this is moot and it's just some feeble excuse to hide the fact that I'm an incredibly lazy individual. And there we are. Our orbit nicely done there, and we can see if we just make a sort of maneuver node without plotting any course corrections, we'll be getting a Laythe encounter just by doing one orbit of Joule once we've passed by Tylo. Okay, so just going back to the idea of searching Lowne Laythe SSTO into the YouTube search bar, by the way, one video that might also show up is the LAYTHE Seaplane I uploaded in 2017. It's kind of almost an annual tradition at this point. 2016, then we did 2017, now we've got 2018. I know if I don't mention this video's existence, people will mention it in the comments, like I don't know my own back catalogue as well as they do, since I said that with the most sincerest love, by the way, in the back of my mind for you hardcore viewers. But yeah, they might say that I sort of misspoke when I said I've done one LAYTHE Seaplane before. In fact, I've made two, not including this video here. This was, the first was my aforementioned LAYTHE Seaplane that carried lots of science units and a mini submarine, but more recently, I sent a seaplane to Laythe that carried even more science units. I had all the science gear, and while it lacked a submarine bay, it made up for it with a full laboratory module, mining drills, and an ore refinery to give it an essentially unlimited range, the idea being that it would be a perfect vehicle to like charter all of Laythe's islands and oceans, because it had an unlimited range, theoretically. However, it was designed to remain on Laythe, and it didn't have the ability or the necessary engines to re-enter Laythe orbit, so I wouldn't personally liken it to this mission you see here, but I feel like it's worthy of mention anyway, because I'm still really proud of that video. And again, if you want to watch it, I'm sure it'll show up if you search Lowne Laythe into the search bar, but again, well, that's it. I felt like it would be worth mentioning that. And we can see here we've switched to the stranded vessel and just sort of time warped to the point where our kind of rescue craft is, the orbital line is sort of going over it. I didn't quite get the inclination right. I could have gone back to a previous quick save and made sure my Laythe encounter was a better angle and done the correction burn at a point where it would have cost a lot less fuel, but I couldn't be bothered. And that's that. So now we've got ourselves on the right tilt. We're going to use the closed cycle mode of the rapiers. We don't want to do too many burns with the closed cycle mode of the rapiers because they are extremely inefficient compared to the nuclear engines, but it doesn't take much energy to deorbit ourselves. We're going to do our deorbiting burn using the rapiers. You can see the kind of glitch here. The re-entry effects, I don't know which mod it is. It's one of my visual mods playing havoc with the visuals. You can see we kind of get those weird... You'll notice it more on the ascent from Laythe, unfortunately. Kind of just the flamey effects just seem to fill up the whole screen in brief flashes, so... I'm not sure what caused that, but it's some visual mod glitch. But I've never seen it happen before, and I haven't changed any of my installs. Maybe it's just this particular craft seems to just... the mods don't like it. So anyway, we have the stranded craft. Well, I don't actually. I've got the debris selected as the target, but I will change it to the what's currently a pink node there. That's the actual craft we're aiming for. So I'm just doing a kind of flyby around, making sure the area is secure. And then you may notice it's very dark at the moment, and that's just because I think it's scatterer or it's environmental vision enhancement to make the ground very, very, very dark at night. So I kind of had to slow myself down and guess where the ground was, and I thought it was a bit lower than what it was. There we go. Touchdown just over 50 meters per second, but luckily if we hit F3 we can see nothing was destroyed, so it was all okay. So we are still a little bit further away than we'd like, so we can just use the Panther engines to just sort of coast our way over. And I'm using the Panthers rather than the air-breathing mode of the Rapiers, just because they are more efficient in air-breathing mode than the Rapiers. Well, you can only use the Panthers in air-breathing mode, but the air-breathing mode of the Rapiers is more inefficient than just the Panthers, provided you're running them on the dry cycle. But we can talk about the wet and dry modes of the Panthers as and when we come to using them, because we will use them, worry not. But there we go, that's the craft there. I've kind of lined up the wingtip with the... I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Look at that craft. And there's a beautiful shot of Joule, by the way. Beautiful. And there's a nice little shot of the craft. And I was seeing here, me and Brad Wisdons were laughing about this, because I'm just like, what was the purpose of this craft? Like, at first I thought maybe it's an Apollo-style module, but then why does the command pod not have an engine? I mean, maybe the engine was destroyed on the landing, but then why does the command pod have parachutes? And if you open the service bay, there is actually just another parachute in there, so I don't really understand. But we could jump the Kerbals onto the wing of the Blunderbird 8 seaplane lander for a lovely photo, and Jebediah would like to get in this photo as well, and he somehow tripped and broke the solar panel through the closed cargo bay door. Don't ask me how. Jebediah will always find a way, I guess, but we can pose for a photo. Hashtag no filter for Kerbalgram there. Jebediah can send out to all of his followers. If you want to follow me on Instagram, by the way, I don't actually know my username. I don't use it very often. I guess if you can Google me, people have found me on Instagram. So I guess I upload like maybe once a year, but you know, it's a big occasion when I do. And then we can just make sure that the other solar panel still works and obviously recharge the lander's batteries before we take off again because we don't have an RTG this time. But then, yeah, a little cinematic shot, and then we can run the Kerbals back into the ship. I really need to show you like the last one getting in because it'd be a fairly repetitive process watching them all getting in individually. And then we can switch, well, not switch, but just time warp to the point where we're passing underneath the rescue craft's orbit so we can launch. And unfortunately, that does mean that we're going to be launching at night, so you can't really see the ground. But hopefully you won't. Hopefully you guys don't mind. So what we're going to do, we're going to throttle up the rapiers in closed cycle mode to begin with. Open cycle, so air breathing mode. And then we're going to toggle the wet mode of the Panthers, which reduces their efficiency, but it greatly increases their thrust, which is what we want. And then when we're reaching a nice high speed, I'm going to activate the closed cycle mode of the rapiers. There we go. Well, it wasn't just as I said, it was a little bit before, but you can hear the audio cue, and you could have seen the point at which the oxides started draining, but I'm getting ahead of myself here, or behind myself, I think. Just to give us an extra bit of thrust, just to clear the water. But as soon as you're clear of the water, it's very important to hit, I think I had the number 2 as the action group key to toggle the rapiers back to air breathing mode, just because we want to be doing as few burns as possible on closed cycle mode. A, because it's a lot more inefficient, and we need to save as much oxidizer as we can for the actual orbital maneuvers and actually the final part of the ascent. We're going to do most of the ascent on air breathing mode because again it's the most efficient way of ascending. It's the most efficient part of the flight. Yeah, I think that made sense. And then, but obviously, as we get very, very high into the atmosphere, there's no more oxygen, so we will have to switch to closed cycle mode. But not a very big burn that. But yeah, you can see how the heating effects are being a bit of a pain in the butt. Pain in the butt. This is a Christian channel. Please don't demonetize me. A lot of stalling right now in this commentary. I'm not gonna lie, I'm just waiting for something to happen so I can talk about it, because I feel like I rambled a lot at the beginning of this video. I mean, I did ramble a lot in my Road to Junior video as well, which was the last video I uploaded, and people said they liked that kind of style where it was kind of talking about the footage at hand, but not really. So maybe I could strike a median, right? So the first half of this video I just talked about nothing during some of the harder parts of the video, if that means. And then for the latter part, we can talk about what's going on screen, even though I've missed a lot of what's going on. But like I say, I hope you can kind of figure it all out from watching the footage. That's the goal. So yeah, very small burn. We have just over 800 meters per second of delta V remaining, or at least we did before I started this burn. So we've got more than enough to rendezvous with the nuclear tug and get our Kerbals on a Kerbin-bound trajectory. So I'm going to just time warp around. I kind of skipped through a lot of me planning maneuver nodes because I've discussed rendezvous before. Laythe's a pretty easy body to rendezvous around. If you can rendezvous ships together around Juno and the Mun, not a lot harder to do Laythe. And to be honest, if you're doing a Laythe return, I would imagine you've probably already got some experience. Playing this game, you've probably rode into Juno and Mun. You're fairly adept at playing the game, kind of in easier settings. Anyway, I don't really know what I'm trying to. Where my train of thought is going. So you can time overhead to... I guess you kind of saw me playing around with maneuver nodes, trying to get our close encounter. So I'm looking at those purple nodes there, just playing around with RCS there to get ourselves nice and close. I couldn't get any closer than 0.1 kilometers, which, to be honest, is pretty damn close. So I'm pretty happy with that. Pretty darn close, I should say. Darn. Point of sails retrograde relative to the target. The rapiers are very powerful. They're inefficient, but they're powerful. So it doesn't take long to slow ourselves down relative to the target. And then we're going to try and dock this thing without monopropellant just because we can. And I can show you how. Because it's a bit of an awkward dock, this. The docking port is at the rear of this plane, which is obviously the same place the engines are. So it's a little bit harder to dock than if, say, the docking port was at the front. So what I'm going to do is going to do a little puff with the engines. And I usually aim for 0.5 meter per second. And then just burn towards it slowly, orienting ourselves round. I think I did use a bit of monopropellant there, but it wasn't to do anything significant. And again, very, very slowly now. I have sped this footage up, by the way, in post-production, in case you're wondering why it seems to be moving quite fast still. I did use a little bit of reaction gimbal from the nuclear tug, just to make sure the docking port was facing the right way. I could have spent a little bit longer if I wanted to, so we didn't have to do that, but I couldn't really be bothered. And just nice and slow. That's the thing with docking. It's easy. You don't need docking port aligner or any of these raster prop monitor assistant mods. It's fine. Just slow it down, take your time, bit of patience, and it's fine. You see, I managed to get the trajectory for the docking quite a way out, and it just automatically coasted along and docked pretty nicely. Just make sure things are moving slowly and take your time. So at this point, I made a maneuver just to get ourselves out of Laythe orbit because we have loads of Delta V, nearly 4,000 units, nearly 4,000 meters per second of Delta V remaining. So that's a huge amount, more than enough to really have to worry about. We don't really need to worry about being efficient. So I just kind of got myself on a trajectory that puts me in dual orbit. And then after much playing around with maneuver nodes, we don't really need to see me faffing around for too long. You can eventually get an encounter with Kerbal. And yeah, there was a lot of faffing around with maneuver nodes, and it was a bit of a nauseating experience having to switch back and forth between the dual focus and Kerbal focus. I was using the right parts of the maneuver node. So we can just skip ahead through that. You guys have seen me make maneuver nodes, I'm sure, at this point. You can see we're ditching out the last of our fuel tanks. So we're on our final stage. Well, I guess the final stage will be landing the plane itself, but the final stage of the nuclear craft. And bada bing, bada boom. So for the last part of sort of these big burns, I like to disable the maneuver node and just watch the patched connects as they come across, because especially with nuclear engines where it's a very long burn, oftentimes the maneuver node isn't very accurate. So on the last part of those sorts of burns, same for rendezvous, I like to just close off the maneuver node and just watch the like little grey indicator nodes, or I guess in the case of rendezvous, the orange and pink ones. But you get the idea. Yeah, you get the idea. I said it myself, didn't I? And final burn, just to get ourselves on a slightly better Kerbal trajectory. We are, of course, going to be aiming to land this thing on the runway, because you may not have noticed, but this thing not only is capable of landing on water, it's also capable of landing on land as well. So we're going to do a nice... we could have air braked, and I mean, we have enough Delta V here, to be honest, to do like a minimus landing as well as a bonus. But, I thought I couldn't be bothered, and I wanted to keep this video... My videos have been getting longer and longer and longer, actually. I don't really know how that happened. I think it's just my rambly commentary style ends up making the videos artificially longer. I don't mean it, though. I don't mean it to. But, my rent ain't getting paid itself, guys. No, it's I kind of like showing... I think that's kind of where my commentaries even came from. I used to make music videos, but I never liked the idea I had to cut out a lot of footage in those to keep them kind of short and to the length of a piece of music. And for commentaries, especially Blunderbirds, which again, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of like having these as serve as a sort of guide, as a sort of tutorial. And so I feel like if I'm cutting out lots of footage, it's just going to kind of detract from that, and it might leave people with more questions than answers. So I kind of hope, these days I seem to be aiming for kind of 20 minutes for video lengths. I think this video will clock in at just under that, but it's usually about 20 minutes now these days for a video. Now these rolls that I'm doing here look a lot more exacerbated, I guess, because this video footage is again being played back at ×4 speed in Sony Vegas. We did have a little explosion there. That was just the solar panels. I know we could have done the explosion happened a little bit earlier actually, but you may have seen it. That was just the big solar panels. They have terrible heat tolerance. And I mean, yeah, we were already circularized around Kerbal at that point, so I could have just gone with a less aggressive air brake, aero brake even, so that we wouldn't lose the solar panels. But again, at the end of the day, the nuclear stage is expendable anyway, so we were going to be losing the solar panels regardless. As long as everything was fine on the aircraft, which it was, it didn't really matter. So that's why I just let those things explode without too much sadness. And I hope you weren't too saddened by it as well. So there's the beautiful re-entry heat glitch again, but I zoomed out. I kind of figured out that if you zoom far enough out, it goes away. Slightly overshot the KSP runway, but it doesn't matter. We have plenty of fuel left in this thing. So we could just switch over to the Panther engines, because like I said earlier, the air-breathing Panthers are way more efficient than the air-breathing Rapiers, so it just makes more sense to do any kind of slow flying using those. And then once we approach the runway, we can get ready to deploy the landing gear. Now I like to set the friction control of the front wheel to 0, and just because that stops the aircraft from spinning out. So if you find your aircraft is spinning out of control on the runway, either on takeoff or landing, just disable friction control on the front wheels, and that will stop the spinning out, usually. But yes, and with that little top tip, there marks the end of the video. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Blunderbirds. I had a lot of fun doing this one, actually. Laythe's Oceans, at least, was one of the places I really wanted to do a Blunderbirds mission to, so I'm happy we've done it. And I hope you are happy with what you just watched. If you're not, then I'm sorry, I guess. But on screen is a link to the music video version of this mission, which I was really happy with. Top right is the full Blunderbirds playlist. Bottom left is the Laythe SS2 video I mentioned earlier. And bottom right was just specially selected for you by YouTube's algorithm. So I hope you enjoy all those. Follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, all in the description, and have a good day.